Not a hunger for affection alone, but a hunger to be chosen, to be seen as worthy in a world that rarely pauses to acknowledge them. These men walk into relationships believing that sincerity is enough, that effort will be returned equally, that loyalty is a currency that never loses value. They don't understand that love, especially modern love, does not unfold on fair ground. It unfolds in an arena shaped by insecurities, expectations, unspoken fears, and competing desires. Men who fall too deeply, too quickly, are often men who were taught to earn love through sacrifice. They learn to give in order to survive emotionally. They learn to impress in order to feel safe. When they meet a woman they admire, their instinct isn't strategy, it's surrender. They hand over their time, their energy, their presence, believing that generosity will be recognized as devotion. But what they don't see is how easily devotion turns into dependence, and how dependence reshapes the balance of the entire relationship. These men build the relationship in their minds before it exists in reality. They imagine futures, not observing the present. They chase potential, not noticing the warning signs. They ignore inconsistencies because their longing is louder than their doubt. Their desire to be loved blinds them to the signals that would save them. And by the time truth arrives, it arrives with consequences. What they thought was stable becomes fragile. What they thought was mutual becomes tilted. The psychology of men who love without boundaries is rooted in the belief that love demands self-abandonment. They do not understand that a man's value increases when he carries himself with sovereignty. A woman does not admire a man who dissolves into her world. She admires a man who has a world she can step into. But these men shrink their world piece by piece, trying to make space for her needs, her moods, her comfort. They stop pursuing their goals. They slowly detach from their mission. Their identity becomes secondary, and they don't notice until the relationship feels like their only source of meaning. Men who overinvest emotionally often don't realize how their behavior shifts the feelings of the woman they love. Attraction is sensitive to imbalance. When she senses he would collapse without her, her instincts change. She becomes cautious. She becomes distant. Not because she is cruel, but because she can feel the weight of his emotional dependence, and no one wants to carry a person who cannot stand on his own. The more he gives, the more pressure she feels. The more pressure she feels, the more she pulls away. He does not understand this process, so he gives even more, hoping it will bring her back. Instead, he accelerates the distance. The psychology of men who break silently instead of speaking honestly is shaped by fear. Fear of disappointing her, fear of losing her, fear of being seen as insecure. These men hold their discomfort inside until it becomes resentment. They avoid saying what bothers them because they think silence is safer. But silence becomes a slow poison. It erodes respect. It erodes presence. It erodes every part of the connection. They think conflict will break the relationship. They don't realize that the absence of conflict is what suffocates it. Then there are the men who anchor their entire emotional identity on one woman. They make her their source of validation, their source of purpose, their emotional compass. When she's warm, they feel alive. When she's distant, they fall apart. Their internal world becomes dictated by someone else's moods, fears, and uncertainties. These men do not understand that love is supposed to enhance your life, not replace it. A relationship cannot carry the weight of a man's entire sense of self, and when it tries to, it collapses. The psychology of men who try to save relationships alone reveals another painful truth. Many men believe suffering is proof of loyalty. They endure emotional confusion, emotional inconsistency, emotional exhaustion, thinking it makes them honorable. But endurance is not the same as wisdom. You cannot rescue a relationship by carrying both sides of it. You cannot create harmony by absorbing every imbalance. A man who tries to fix everything ends up fixing nothing,
because he turns the relationship into a structure that stands if he never stops holding it up. Men who love deeply but lose slowly follow a predictable path. They give too much, they expect too little, and they hold on too long. They try to negotiate with their own pain instead of facing it. They rationalize red flags. They minimize their needs. They believe that asking for more will push her away. What they fail to see is that asking for nothing pushes her away even faster. A man without boundaries doesn't appear humble, he appears uncertain, and uncertainty weakens the emotional bond. Yet underneath all this psychology lies something more tragic. These men do not know their own worth. They measure their value through how loved they feel, not through who they are independent of affection. A woman senses this quickly. She feels the emptiness he hides. She feels the fragility beneath his devotion, and attraction cannot grow where fragility takes the throne. Women admire strength, direction, inner balance, not perfection, but stability. A man who knows himself doesn't beg for reassurance, he becomes the reassurance. The psychology of men who rise above heartbreak transforms only when they confront the truth. Love does not thrive when a man kneels before it. Love thrives when a man stands beside it. When he knows that affection is meaningful, but not the foundation of his entire identity. When he understands that he must remain grounded in his purpose, even while caring deeply. The man who learns this becomes different. He stops chasing intensity and starts valuing compatibility. He stops clinging to people who confuse him. He stops surrendering his boundaries to preserve temporary peace. He becomes someone who can walk away without collapsing, someone who gives without losing himself, someone who loves without abandoning his own direction. The psychology of men who finally understand themselves is clear. They do not love from emptiness anymore. They love from abundance. They do not fear losing someone who cannot handle their truth. They do not try to be everything to a woman who gives them half effort. They do not negotiate their dignity just to avoid being alone. These men become steady. They become selective. They become harder to manipulate and easier to respect. And in that transformation, love no longer becomes a battlefield. It becomes a choice, one they make without fear, without desperation, and without betraying their own identity. That is the psychology of men who evolve. And it is the path every man eventually must walk if he wants love that doesn't destroy him.